Hey folks, what's up? Welcome back to another PoMaEX video, and it's been a while since I did the last team building. And obviously a lot of things have changed in the game, right? And a lot of whether it's meta shifts or in terms of different units that have been coming out, the new mechanics and all that stuff. So I thought I'd update the team building guide video that I've done a while ago, which a lot of people tell me was sometimes helpful, which I'm thankful that it helps some people. So I thought we do this again with more updated, I guess, either roster and game modes, all that stuff. So yeah, let's talk about it then. So first of all, team building, you gotta know the basics, right? There's 3 slots that you could put on your team, right? In terms of single player. I'm not going to talk about co-op because co-op is not very really, there's not much happening with co-op game modes at the moment. And there really isn't much team builder co-op. You just have to hope you get like good teammates that like could support and stuff or whatever. So yeah. So again, the first thing you have to realize is there's 3 slots in your team. Use them, right? 3 units are almost always better than 2 or 1. Maybe not even all. 3 units are better than 1, right? Right, or 2, whatever. So use up all your 3 slots, right? And so start team building. We're going to talk about, again, very different versions of team comps, right? And or different types of teams, and I'll probably timestamp them somewhere in the video, hopefully, if it works. There's this new like timestamping feature. So first of all, we're gonna just talk about generally, right, a pretty general sort of team building, and then we'll talk about a bit more interesting team comps that include strikers that have certain multipliers that you'd probably have to build your team around. Then we'll talk about weather teams, we'll talk about terrain teams, we'll talk about dual strikers, we'll talk about triple strikers. We could talk about toxic stall teams, right? Stall teams overall, and it's just some other different types of teams that we could build, right? So starting off with the most basic kind of team building, which is you go ahead when you're fighting a stage, your number one thing to keep in mind is you use a striker. Doesn't have to be a striker or a damage dealer, right? Someone that could do damage, because unless you're stalling, toxic stalling, if you're not using damage dealer, you will have a much harder time clearing the stage, right? I'm not saying it's impossible. You could use full supports to clear stages, but it's going to be a bit harder, right? So strikers are generally damage dealers. A lot of tech units are damage dealers as well, right? In fact, most techs that have grids at least are all damage dealers, or most of them are, right? Strikers usually deal damage on their regular moves. Techs, a lot of them deal damage on their sync moves, although that's just in general. Obviously, a lot of strikers do good damage on their sync moves as well. A lot of techs do good damage on their regular moves as well, right? So when going into stage, first find your striker that you want to use. Generally, you want to find what's super effective against the opponent. Not always the super effective option is the better option, but more often than not, super effective is much better because of the fact that super effective gives a two times multiplier to your damage dealer, right? So you do 2 times more damage when it's super effective, at least in this game, right? So, all right, we're gonna use Karina for example. So, what do we do? Like if we've the opponent's fighting weak, we've chosen our damage dealer, it's gonna be Karina. What units do we put around her? Well, we look at her kit and look what she needs, right? That's generally how you build a team. You find supports to surround your striker with that could give your striker the most that it could get out of, right? And reach its maximum damage potential. So when looking at Karina's kit, you look at her, first of all, you look at her main damaging move. Her main damaging move, she has 2 damaging moves before Mega. Got Vacuum Wave and Close Combat. Obviously, Close Combat is the stronger move. It has 136 power over here at 3 out of 5 versus 22 power, right? And then when you Mega, you also have Power Up Punch, which is obviously not as good as Close Combat. So you're looking at, again, what this unit needs, and that's usually on the non-attacking moves, the stuff over here. So look at what she has. She has Dire Hit, which raises user's critical rate by 1 stat rank. Use it 2 times, right? 2 out of 2. And then skate on through your training move, which raises the user's attack by 1 stat rank, raises user's speed by 3 stat ranks, right? So when you look at it, look what stats she gets. So her main damaging move is close combat, which is physical, right? So you want physical attack buffs. And in terms of buffs that she gets herself outside of Power Punch, you have +2 attack total on the 2 skate on throughs, and then the +2 crit total on dire hits, right? Assuming you're not getting any MP refreshes on her grid. So that means you have +2 crit, +2 attack. What they cap out at, crit caps out at +3, which at +3 you have a 100% chance of critting every single one of your moves. Crit is incredibly powerful. It goes through opponents' barriers, you know, damage reductions, all that stuff. And then, you know, on top of giving you 1.5 times damage multiplier on your damage, and then your and then your attack buffs, special attack buffs, they both cap at +6. Again, we only have +2 over here, so what we're looking for is +1 crit and +4 attack, because we already have +2 attack, +2 crit, right? So we need at least +1 crit, +4 attack. So we go look for supports, right? Supports that could do that. You go look for, you know, you could do this, or if you know the units, you could just go through the units. Raise ally stat, you go attack up and critical hit rate up, and then you'll find you know, some of the units that you potentially could use over here. Although I don't know why this seems wrong, but yeah, no, this seems wrong because some of these don't buff attack at all or crit. But anyways, regardless, you know, we could find someone who buffs, again, +4 attack and +1 crit. One of those units could be Lieutenant Surge over here, or this Bugsy, right? For example, this Bugsy, or actually even, I guess, more simple unit, right? This Torchic that everyone gets for free. This Torchic gives your team +2 attack every time you use X attack all. That's for your whole team, right? And then that gives you a total of +4 attack. And then you have Blazing Hope, which raises the special attack. You don't really need special attack for Karina, but at the end there, it also raises the crit of an allied sync bear by 1 stat rank, and you could use it twice. So you have +2 crit over here and +4 attack. Remember, we needed +1 crit and +4 attack, and we got +4 attack and +2 crit over here, which is enough to max out Karina's you know, a physical attack and crit. She doesn't really have much multipliers, right, that are worthy of much mention, right? So we got a damage healer in, our main damage healer, we got our main, you know, offensive buffing support, and then the last slot, you should probably go with a tank, someone that could take a few hits, right? For example, let me find another free unit support that could, you know, maybe act as a tank. Where's there? Skyla. Skyla, for example, has really good defensive stats. That's 800 HP, mine's 20 out of 20, but you know, very high HP, very high defenses, right? And then you have Take Flight, which buffs the defense of your whole team. Obviously, defense, you know, defensive stats are split into physical defense, and special defense, right? So this is just for physical defense, right? But yeah, and then you have potions that could heal your team, right? If anyone gets hurt, you could heal them, and that's just a pretty basic, I guess, team comp, right? And then after that, you have to switch your tactics. Make sure to switch your tactics, where you have your tank on front, and then generally your damage dealer at the lowest, because your damage dealer is not can't take as many hits, right? For example, this Torchic could take, you know, has much better defensive stats than your Lucario. Also, Lucario does debuff both her defense and special defense every time you close combat, which again, it's nice when you have someone else to help buff your defenses a bit, right? So again, this is a very simple, straightforward team comp, right? There's no multipliers that we have to think about. There's no weather, terrain, all that stuff, right? Just a single striker, not dual striker, not triple striker team comp. This is a very basic team comp, right? Setup. And again, I'm not going to talk about battling. I did a video on battling. You guys could check that out, right? And for battling, right? In terms of you want to go in triple Q, right? 3 moves in a single turn, which is going to be crucial or a bit more important when we talk about dual strikers. So I'll hold that. So anyways, That's for a basic single striker team comp, right? Again, very, very simple. Look what she buffs herself, and then look what she needs, right? To fill up all her buffs. Pick up someone to fill up those buffs, and then you could probably have a tank over here. So, moving on to a bit more sophisticated, I guess, team comps, right? For example, if a unit has multipliers, right? What are multipliers? Multipliers are passives that, if certain conditions are filled, it powers up your moves. These are really, really good. Sometimes there's 30% power ups. Sometimes there's 100% power ups, right? Sometimes there's 50% power ups to your moves. So these multipliers are really, really good. For example, a unit that has a lot of multipliers is this one, Houndoom over here, right? So Houndoom, what we have on our sync grid, sync grids are just an expansion to pick up more stuff, right? You have stuff like Dirty Fighting 5. When the opponent is affected by a status condition, whether it's sleep, poison, paralysis, burn, whatever, it gives an extra 50% boost to Houndoom's damage, right? Which is really, really, that's 50% boost, right? And you have Foul Fighting here, where when the opponent's, when the target is flinched, confused, or trapped, that gives another 50%, right? Those add together as a 100% boost to your damage, right? Which basically it's 2 times. Like using 1 Dark Pulse is like using 2 if you have, again, the opponent flinch, trap, confused, or plus paralyzed, slept, poisoned, badly poisoned, burned, all that stuff, right? And there's actually even one more multiplier on our grid that I'm not a huge fan of picking up myself personally, but it exists, right? And you can pick that up if you want an extra 30%, if you even want more multipliers, which is the one down here. Overpower, right? The more the target's special attack is lowered, the more it powers up the user's move. So every time the opponent's special attack gets lowered, your moves get a bit stronger, right? This caps out at 30% at -6 special attack, right? So in this case, you're looking at someone that could status the opponent, flinch, trap, confuse the opponent, and also someone that could debuff the opponent's special attack and hopefully also tank as well, right? So when we're looking at that, the good thing about Houndoom in this case is Houndoom can buff all of her stats by herself, right? You have Dire Hit Plus, which +2 crit, right? You could max that out if you use it twice, and then you have Entertain Me, which this is pretty, but basically this one at max HP gives you +3 special attack anyway, so you use it twice, and then you have +6 special attack here, and then you have +3 crit over here. And so you need to find someone with, again, someone that could trap or it's someone who could status and also give the volatile status conditions. For example, someone like that would be Tangle over here, which has Toxic to status and Infestation to trap, right? So this one unit could activate both those multipliers. So if you run Houndoom together with Tangela with those multipliers on her grid, that's an extra 100% boost to your damage, right? That's literally just, that doubles your damage, which is really, really good. Or something else like, Serena, which is a bit better just because she has sleep, and sleep is very, very powerful because the opponent will attack you, right? You'll have Hypnosis here to put the opponent to sleep, and then you'll have Fire Spin that leaves your target trapped. Although Hypnosis, the opponent does like wake up, from time to time, so you have to reapply it, which is slightly a bit more annoying than Toxic, which is a bit hard to get rid of from the opponent, right? But these units are all fine to use. Again, in this case, Serena, throw in there to do a lot of that stuff, right? And then you need someone that could debuff the opponent's special attack. There's quite a few units that could do that, right? And for example, if we, trying to look for that, you could do that. And yeah, something like, for example, Getsus, the Noble Roar, lowers the opponent's attack and special attack in this case. And then if you pick up on the sync grid, double drop, where it doubles, double drops it, right? You could have the opponent at -6 special attack in 3 turns, right? A lot of people are wondering, well, why can't you just Snarl with Houndoom? Well, you can, but it's not very, very good, because Snarl, first of all, it is AoE, but it only lowers the opponent's special attack by 1 stat rank every time you use it. And here's the thing. What you want to do with Houndoom is generally just buff yourself, and then use a sync move so you can Mega, and then you can start using Dark Pulse instead of Snarling, because Snarl does not do that much damage. Snarl is 46 power, and Dark Pulse is 114, right, at 5 out of 5. So, again, Dark Pulse is much, much more powerful. It's much better to relegate the special attack debuffing job to someone else, instead, so they could do it while you spam big dark pulses here, right? And in Ghetsis' case, since Ghetsis can debuff it by 2 every time, right, you'll get -6 special attack in 3 turns, right? And then by that time you're still buffing with Houndoom, and then you sync with Houndoom, then you could start dark pulsing the opponent, right? And there you go. The opponent probably, slept and trapped there, and then the opponent has, -6 -6 special attack, so you have the full 130% multiplier over there with your dark pulse. That's really, really good. Although again, personally, I wouldn't care too much about the overpower. This is just for an example, right? Again, there's a lot of units with different multipliers. Generally, the multipliers are in a few categories, right? It's either you debuff the opponent's stats for a multiplier, you buff your own stats for a multiplier, you get stats from being in a terrain or weather, right? Even if the weather doesn't itself buff it, like for example, hail doesn't do anything, right? But there are certain multipliers that, for example, invigorating hail, that buffs your moves in hail, right? It's a passive. And then there's also multipliers that are based on a lot of other things, right? Flinch, trap, confusion, or status, right? Those again are some general multipliers that are out there, right? For example, let me find someone who has a multiplier based on stat buffs. Let's see. Someone who has a multiplier based on, for example, Lopunny has a multiplier that's based on stat buffs over here. Ramming speed, the more the speed is raised, the more it powers up the user's moves, right? And then there's, again, units that get stat buffs from weather. For example, Zinnia, she gets stat buffs just from like any weather, right? Weather Surge 3 is if there's weather, extra 30% damage, right? Or a more specific weather, for example, Garchomp has over here, if I could find it, there it is, Surging Sand 3, extra 30% damage when you're in Sandstorm, right? And then there's also multipliers on the sync moves, right? For example, Red over here, on a sync move, you have Haymaker, which doubles your sync move damage when your attack is maxed out, right? Haymaker. And then you have Solar Flare 5, which powers up your sync moves when the weather is sunny, extra 50%, right? Outside with the sun buff. And then there's also, again, sync nuke multipliers that require the opponent to be trapped, flinch, confused. A lot of tech units actually have that, right? Almost every single tech in the game, except for like Kukui and Mew, if I remember correctly, have an extra multiplier built into their sync move, right? It's an innate multiplier. For example, Koga is the move's power increases, in this case 2 times, right? 2 times multiplier on your sync move if the target is poisoned or badly poisoned. There's also units like let's see, for example, May, sync move multiplier, right? If the weather is rainy, that's another 2 times multiplier over here, right? And then Hoopa, when there's no increases in target stats, right? That's another multiplier for you. So again, there's a lot of different multipliers on these units, whether sync moves or regular moves. When you're building teams with units that have good multipliers, although again, don't just like go in for like any multiplier, like, oh, this, for example, there's some like condition where like, oh, you have to be at full HP the whole time, and then it gives you like only 10%. Like sometimes some of these aren't exactly worth it, right? For example, there's like some really, really bad multipliers that aren't really worth going for. For example, Mewtwo's Power Reserve 2 powers up your user's moves in a pinch, so when you're under 33% HP, you get an extra 20% damage buff. This is not very worth it because you don't want to be at low HP, right? You'd rather stay alive longer and not be in that, again, very dangerous range, right? So there are some multipliers that aren't really worth chasing after. Just really depends on your team building, right? Team comp, and how good those multipliers are generally, right? So moving on, speaking of weather, let's talk about some weather teams. So there are, I think, 4 weathers total in this game, right? And that's sun, rain, hail, and sandstorm, right? All these are really, really good. The weather teams are among the top teams in the game, right? Top teams in the game are all weather teams. weather and terrain teams, because of just how powerful they are, right? Just how powerful they are, especially sun and rain, because of the fact that sun and rain actually do something outside of, in comparison to hail and sandstorm, which they don't really do anything other than chip damage for both teams, right? Sun and rain actually do something, and sun buffs everyone's fire type moves by 1.5 times, which is extra 50% damage for anyone's fire type moves in sun, rather than rain's the same except for water type moves. So that's why, again, those are really, really powerful. So the weather is just basically a free multiplier, right? And when you're building weather teams, obviously you want to bring units that could bring those weathers, and also bring units that can take advantage of those weathers, right? So two component part. For example, over here we have a Kyogre, who in the passive Downpour makes the weather rainy first time it enters the battle. The other great thing about Kyogre over here is it actually also extends where's the it also extends the duration of rainy weather, right, as well, which is really, really good, right, in this case. So usually weather is around for like, one sync move cycle, but if you extend it, you get extra, more extension of that weather, right? So Kyogre, again, only comes in with the weather, so once it's over, you probably would want something else to set the weather. For example, Kyogre does have a sync node in the sync grid that sets up rain again, right? In this case, it's shower sync, makes the weather rainy for the first time the user's sync move is used in each battle, right? So that would, again, set up rain when your rain is gone. Or another unit that could do that is, for example, Swampert over here, that could use Rain Dance, and it has 2 uses, 2 move gauges every time, but it just summons rain at will, right? Whenever you need rain, you click Rain Dance and it summons it at will. Again, it's only two uses here, unless you get a MP refresh on the grid, right? So again, the great thing about rain is that rain teams, it's just a free extra multiplier, right? Without really having to do anything other than just having the weather constantly up on the field, right? A lot of these weathers, again, do trigger some multipliers and passives, right? For example, May has a few, right? May, for example, Dire Rain crits land more easily when the weather is rainy. That's an extra +1 crit in rain, right? And for example, Blastoise has stuff like Raging Rain 3, extra 30% damage when the weather is rainy, right? And you have Racing Rain 2, which quickly charges the move gauge in rain as well. And then you have Refreshing Rain 1, which heals you when the weather is rainy. So there's a lot of these passives and skills that are related to these weathers that make them really, really good. Again, the only ones that innately buff fire and water type moves are sun and rain. Hail and sandstorm doesn't do that. However, hail and sandstorm, usually there are units that have, again, those related multipliers and stuff on their sync grids as well. For example, we could find Ice Steven over here, right? This guy has Hasty Hail, and Hail charges a hail in Hailstorm and charges move gauge faster. Healing Hail, you heal in Hail, right? There's also Invigorating Hail, which I think is in the passive, right? Invigorating Hail powers up your moves by 50% in a Hailstorm. So, and then same thing with Sand. There's also a lot of passives related to Sand as well over here, right? So yeah, weather teams are, again, very, very, very powerful. Just go with whatever, again, in this case, makes sense and you could capitalize on, right, when you have weather. So make sure you capitalize on all the stuff that you can in those specific weathers, which is, again, very, very good in those cases. Although, again, you probably want to change the targeting order. Again, you always want to target with your tank first, right? Moving on, terrain. Terrain is kind of like weather, right? Except a different name, I guess. So there's going to be new terrains added in the future as well, but at the moment in the game, there's only usable ones, right? Sometimes the opponent will use grassy terrain, but there really isn't grassy terrain that's usable for players in the game at the moment. If in the future there are, then there is, right? But at the moment, the big ones are psychic terrain over here, right? And electric terrain. These are the two, you know, big terrains, and these are very, very powerful as well because both of them are basically the same as sun and rain, in which that they also buff your team's, in this case psychic terrain, buffs your team's psychic damage, you know, 1.5 times, and then with electric terrain, buffs electric type moves 1.5 times as well, right? So both, again, both regular moves and sync moves. So yeah, in this case, Musharna is the one that sets up the terrain. Musharna's probably the better tank here, but Musharna is the one that sets up terrain. Oh, I also do want to mention, before we just completely go over the weather thing, there are different ways to set up weather, right? Generally, there's weather on entry, right? Kyogre does that, Groudon does that. There's a node in Rosanta's grid that does that. There's ways of setting up weather on sync, right? For example, Lyra Meganium has a node on their grid that gives sun every time they sync, right? Same thing with Silver. There's a passive that gives sun on sync. Ice Steven, right? Summer Steven has a hail on sync, you know, passive, right? And then there's just basically on their moves, like the Rain Dance on main Swampert, Rain Dance on Winona, Pelipper, Sunny Day on Blaine Rapidash, Sandstorm on Acerola, Palisand. So yeah, back to terrain. So terrain, again, this is basically the same thing, right? With weather, they're just like weather, except just different, you know, name, right? They're field effects, and again, there are things that are affiliated with these terrains. For example, there's Precognition 2 over here, which quickly charges the move gauge when the field is psychic terrain, right? There's Hidden Heal. This isn't specifically for psychic terrain, but this is for the move psychic terrain. When you use it, you have gradual healing for your whole team, which is, again, all things that you should probably consider. And yeah, there are, you know, just a lot of passives, all that stuff. So again, for example, for this team, this is probably one of the best psychic teams right out there. You have a support here that could buff the crit for Musharna, because Musharna could also do damage here. All right, Sword of Power, very, very powerful move. Even though the power is only, what, 15 over here, but every time it gets a buff, it gets much, much more powerful, right? One of the strongest, you know, 2-gauge moves in the game. So you have Sabrina here to buff Musharna's special attack. You could help, you know, max out Hoopa's special attack as well, although Hoopa also does have a node that you don't really need that ramp up, right? So you're mainly going to be using it on Musharna, right? But yeah, you have Sabrina to buff Musharna and Hoopa if you need it, right? And Sabrina also give more stats for Rising Tide. This one's a multiplier where the syncs, when the user's stats are raised, the more it powers up the sync moves, right? Sabrina could give accuracy on 6 Sense, right? Special attack, and then Reflect Pep Rally could give speed to your team, right? Just give extra, you know, stats over there, right? And Sabrina could do some damage on her own as well, right? So this is a very, very, very powerful team. And yeah, that's basically the terrains. Next, let's talk about stall teams, right? So this is an example of a toxic stall team. Your toxic user is Tangela, which has a move toxic, right? Usually when you're stalling against stages that have a lot of HP. For example, if you're fighting Master Mode, right, you'd go ahead and, you know, give the opponent a lot of HP ups, right? Max HP up, give them a lot of those so that they, you know, a lot of HP. So since it does damage based on percentage of the opponent's HP, right, then they'll take a lot of damage there. And then also when you're picking up max HP means you don't have to, you know, use more points on the opponent to give them more damage or other more threatening things, right? So yeah, toxic to badly poisoning the opponent, infestation to also trap them as well, right, to do trap damage. And then basically toxic stall team is you just want to outlive your opponent, right? When the opponent goes down to either toxic or trap, you want to make sure your team stays alive. So for example, you could pick up good tanks like Xerneas. Xerneas is a great tank because not only do you have good defensive stats, you also have Horn Leech that heals you, right? You take HP from the opponent, right? The more damage you deal to the target, the more it heals this user. Also, you have this, which gives gradual healing to your whole team as well, right? You could also cure You could also cure status conditions. You also have a recuperation when you sink. You have heal on your HP. Mass heal helps you heal a bit more. Impervious, that could, you know, help prevent the opponent from debuffing your stats. There's also healing hand that can heal 30% chance of healing any conditions. So again, that's the most you could do, you know, to keep yourself alive, right? If you have like a vigilance, lucky skill, right, protect you from crits. And yeah, also your sync move can max out your team's special defense, right? Which is really, really good. Skylo over here could max out your team's physical defense if you get an MP refresh on the trainer move, right? You also have potions with massive healers, right? So that turns your potion from a 40% potion into a 60% potion, right? And then again, you do have 2 of these MP refreshes, so chances of getting potions back. Again, this is all in the name of staying alive, right? To outlive your opponent and watch them slowly get taken out by the, again, poison trap combo. So that's basically stall teams. Now let's talk about constructing dual striker teams. So dual striker teams are a bit more tricky because there are a few things that you do have to consider, right? When building dual striker teams, things that you have to consider is, one, you have to put 2 damage healers in, right? That's the name, right? Dual striker doesn't have to mean, doesn't mean they have to be strikers, just damage healers, right? It's just the colloquial term, right? So you have to make sure you have 2 good damage healers or solid damage healers, and then you have to make sure that you have enough gauges. So every turn you could queue up 3 moves, right? So queue up 3 moves. You have enough gauges for that. You have to make sure you have a tank that could survive long enough, and you have to make sure that most of their multipliers are satisfied. Sometimes, you know, if the team comp's a bit wonky, you might miss out on 1 or 2 multipliers. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but generally, you know, try to give them their max power, right? For example, this team over here, right? It's a pretty easy to set up, pretty solid dual striker team comp, right? In this case, fulfills most of those things, right? Aerodactyl has dire hit, all plus, which could help buff Steven's crit as well, even though Steven could buff his own crit. But for example, if you had another damage healer over here that didn't have crit buffs, you know, he could help buff crit. Bonjour can max out his own attack and special attack, so you don't need another, you know, anyone else to specifically help raise his attack, special attack, right? And he has very, very good speed, 440 speed over here. You could get even more speed buffs after you mega, although again, it's slightly wonky to do. You have combo freebie, 30% chance of applying the free move next effect when an attack is successful. So every hit you have a 30% chance of not having to spend any gauges with your next move, because again, it is pretty costly, right? It's Hyper Beam's a 4 gauge move, right? Pretty expensive. So yeah, those are just some things to help, right? You could also pick up like move gauge refresh on the sync grid as well to help with the dual striker comp. Steven over here also very, very fast once you mega him. Also 400 plus speed, almost 500 speed over here, right? Very, very, very fast. He also has a node in his grid. I'm not sure if I picked it up personally. Fleet Feet buffs your speed by 1 stat rank every time a Dragon Ascent is successful, right? So that further helps you maintain your gauge. So again, you could queue up a Dragon Ascent, you could queue up a Hyper Beam, right? And then most importantly, you have Rosant over here, which helps in 3 ways. First of all, to take hits, right? Rosant has relatively good, you know, defenses, solid HP, right? And on top of that, you have move gauge acceleration over here, which accelerates move gauge. When you're building dual or triple strikers, move gauge acceleration is a lot of times the key, right? Because a lot of times speed buffs aren't exactly enough, right? Move gauge acceleration just takes it to the level, you know, the next level, right? Move gauge acceleration helps a lot. So there's a lot of ways to help maintain speed, whether it's manual speed buffs, move gauge refresh, free move next, move gauge acceleration under certain weather or terrain or certain circumstances, right? Those are all ways of help managing your gauge, and so you make sure you could queue up 3 moves every single turn. Again, if you're wondering what I'm talking about 3 moves, I did a battle guide video. You guys could check that out. Explains that a bit more, right? Why you should probably try to queue up 3 moves every single turn, right? With all your sync pairs, including your support, right? And also you have X Tackle, so that can help Steven max out his attack, because he only has, you know, 2 uses of X Attack over here, which only gives you +4, and obviously you want +6 over here if you don't want to pick up the extra attack node or MP refresh on the X attack in his sync grid, right? So Rosanta helps max out Steven's attack. Also, Rosanta helps with Steven's multipliers because all the presents gives you random stat buffs, right? That again Steven needs with his multiplier, which is good form, which the more your stats are raised, the more it powers up moves. So this, for example, again, very, I guess, successful dual striker comp. Something else could be, for example, we could run a Sandstorm dual striker comp, right? For example, in this case, we could throw in Olivia, Emmett, and Ingo. Ingo over here sets up Sandstorm, but not only sets up Sandstorm, he could tank well, very good defenses. He also has speed buffs on his Mud Slap. There's a node, if I remember correctly, or was it passive? Oh, Sandy Pepperelli raises speed of all ally sync pairs by 1 stat rank when you use a move during Sandstorm, right? So again, that helps with your move gauge. Also, all aboard can raise the attack of all your allies, raise the crit of all allied sync pairs by 2, and then applies free move next effect to all allies sync pairs during Sandstorm. So again, free move for a whole team, so everyone gets a free move, and again, that helps with the move gauges as well. On top of that, there's a lot of sand multipliers and stuff, right? Ferocious Affliction raises attack and special attack of all sync pairs by 2 stat ranks. For the first time, the status move is used by the user's Pokemon is successful each battle, right? Sedimentary protect users from damage from a Sandstorm, and then the user's defense, special defense increased by 30% during Sandstorm, so helps them, tank here as well. And then over here you have something like an Olivia, which can take advantage of the Sandstorm, right? She has sand multipliers. There's Sand Blaster 5, extra 50% power up your sync move in the Sandstorm. Certain Sand 3, extra 30% to your moves in a Sandstorm, right? And then this would be a good combination because over here you could use your sync move with Olivia because Olivia has a stronger sync move, and then Emmett you don't have to run all those sync stuff. You could just pick a grid where you just do a lot of damage with your regular Stone Edge, right? And then there you go, you have Olivia there for big sync move damage, also some Stone Edge damage as well, and then you could have Emmett here with the much more powerful Stone Edges, right? So this is really again good team comp to run, right? So yeah, a lot of these work. Again, a lot of sand passives here as well, sand superiority, all that stuff. So yeah, that's I guess generally how you run dual striker team comps. And then the last one we're going to talk about is triple striker team comps. These are the hardest to run because you need a lot of requirements that generally don't really come when you don't bring supports. Obviously, in this case, a lot of times you're not bringing supports or a support or supports, right? So triple striker team comps, you need a damage dealer to be the tank, right? So usually the hardest part in triple striker team comps is someone who could help survive. So you have to find someone who could do damage and also survive. For example, in this case, we could have Marnie over here, right? She has good defenses, her HP is good, and on top of that, her bulk up buffs your defense every time you use it, on top of your attack, right? And then you have Not Today, which after you use it, after you max out your defenses, it also helps you max out your special defense, right? So you have max special defense, max defense, and you have, I think, gradual healing as well, right? Gradual healing and endurance. So this is a fantastic tank that also does a lot of damage because this is very good attack stat, right? Spirit Break's a 4-gauge move, very powerful. She has a really strong sync move as well, right? Over here, on top of some multipliers that she gets, Overpower and Devastation, for example, right? So very powerful unit for doing damage and tanking hits, right? And also she could max out her offense stats because bulk up maxes out your attack, right? And the passive makes it so that a double buffer every time a stats buff, it buffs it by double. So 3 turns of bulk up that maxes out your attack and defense. And then critical infliction, every time you use a status move, it buffs your crit as well. So that maxes out your crit over here. So max crit, max physical attack by yourself. And then you have blue here, which is again just a really great move gauge management. Fast damage deal, right? Obviously big damage deal with Hyper Beam. But you also have Dire Hit All Plus, which helps buff Iris, Champion Iris's crit, because she can't, max it out herself. And then you have Bonjour, which maxes out your own attack and special attack. Don't need anyone else to help. And then again, the combo freebie stuff, good for gauges. The speed is good for gauges, right, as well. And then over here, Champion Iris, what she has is she has move gauge acceleration, right? She gives move gauge acceleration to her whole team, and she could buff your own or buff her own attack by 2, although it's only by 2 and there's only 1 MP. So generally what you want to do is pick up an MP refresh on this, right, so that you could buff your attack even further, right? And then she does some solid damage on Dragon Rush, but more importantly, she has a very, very powerful sync nuke, right? So in this case, yeah, you got 3 competent damage dealers over here, someone who could tank, good gauge management overall. You got someone with move gauge acceleration, someone with, again, very, very good gauge management, right? And you know, again, someone else maybe instead of Iris, I guess probably a bit better one would be N, just because he maxes out his stuff by himself, right? Because +3 over here, instead of having to rely on a MP refresh. But yeah, he also doesn't get sun in this case. But yeah, there's a lot of ways that you could run triple strikers. Again, it is a bit harder, right? It is a bit harder. Generally, for example, I guess water, you could do something like Kyogre, who can max out all your stats. May, you can max out all your stats. With Dire Rain, you could max out, you basically get a max crit, and then you have Inclement Intellect that can max out your special attack. And then here you can have another water type damage healer. In my opinion, something like Gloria would be good here, because you could just snipe shot and then scoop him out every time. So you get a downtime, which helps with your gauges, right? And all that stuff. Or yeah, or something like a Grimsley that's just very, very, very fast, right? Extremely fast speed. So something like that would help as well. So yeah, I guess those are all the you know, different ways of building team comps. Obviously, well, not all, but you know, just a general ways of team composition, building team comps. Again, one more thing that I do want to caution people on is that not everything is about your own units. It's also about the opponent's stage, right? Again, the big one is what they're weak against, right? You use super effective mons, but there's also certain stages that have, you know, certain things. For example, this new extreme battle stage, right? Which I have a bad habit of doing. A lot of times I don't check, but you could check what the opponent is weak to, right? So for example, the middle unit is weak to physical moves, the sides are weak to special moves, so you could plan your team accordingly, right? You could throw in a physical and a special unit, or damage healer, or you know, or in a dual striker comp, or you could use someone that could do good physical and special damage, right, as well, right? And then when you're attacking him, you could use physical, and attacking the sides, you could use specials, right? So anyways, that's for this one, I guess. Hope you all enjoyed it. Hopefully it was helpful. Oh my god, that was 40 minutes straight of me just talking. But yeah, hopefully it was helpful. Hopefully it helps, you know, folks, in terms of team building, right? Again, it's not an exhaustive list of all the teams you could build. Obviously they'll take forever, but yeah. Hopefully it was a bit helpful. So anyways, that's me this one. Hope you all enjoyed. I'm gonna guys think in the comments down below. Like, enjoy this video, subscribe to my channel for some more PoMaEX content. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.